I'm going to write this all out because I need people to understand the full picture. I've been sitting on this for 4 months. I've told maybe 3 people in real life. I'm not looking for sympathy, I just need to get this out of my head and into words because if I don't, I think it's going to eat me alive. This is long, I'm warning you now. Get a drink, Part 1, The Life I Thought I Had. My name doesn't matter. Call me Daniel. I'm 38 years old, live in a mid-sized city in the Midwest, and until about 4 months ago I thought I had a genuinely good life. I married my wife, I'll call her Mara, when we were both 27. We met in grad school. She was studying clinical psychology. I was doing my MBA. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and I remember thinking she was the most self-possessed person I'd ever talked to. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was confident, funny, a little sharp-tongued, deeply smart. I was gone within the first hour of meeting her. We dated for 2 years, moved in together, got a dog, a black lab named Hector, got engaged, got married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard in Vermont. 70 people. Fireflies, her grandmother crying, the whole thing. It was genuinely one of the best days of my life. We built a life together the way most people do, slowly, brick by brick. She finished her PhD and got a position at a private therapy practice. I climbed up through finance, eventually landing a director-level role at a regional investment firm. We bought a house. We renovated the kitchen. We argued about paint colors. We tried for kids for 2 years, got pregnant twice, miscarried both times, and eventually made the quiet, grief-soaked decision to stop trying. It was one of the hardest things we ever went through together, or so I thought. I want to be specific about this because I think it matters. We were not a miserable couple. I know a lot of these stories start with our marriage was already falling apart or we hadn't connected in years. That wasn't us. We had friends who called us the couple they wanted to be. We took trips together. We had in-jokes that were 11 years old. We still held hands watching TV. I genuinely liked her. I genuinely thought she genuinely liked me. That's what makes this so hard to write. Part 2, The First Crack. It started, as these things often do, with something small. Last October I came home from a work trip to Chicago. I'd been gone 4 days. Mara had seemed distracted on our calls, but I chalked it up to heavy client load. She works with trauma patients. It takes a toll. I never pushed too hard when she seemed withdrawn after work because she'd explained early in our marriage that she needed to emotionally decompress before she could be present at home. I respected that. I always respected that. When I got home, she was warm, happy to see me, made my favorite pasta. It was a good night. Normal, easy. But when I went to plug in my laptop charger in the home office the next morning, I noticed her second phone. Now I want to be careful here because I know how that sounds. Second phone, like I walked into a thriller, but there's context. Mara had always had 2 phones, one personal, one from the practice. Her practice used a separate encrypted line for patient-related communication to maintain confidentiality, HIPAA stuff. So a second phone in our house was not unusual. Except this one wasn't her practice phone. I know her practice phone. It's a beat-up Samsung in a blue case that she's complained about for 2 years. This was an iPhone, rose gold, in a clear case. No stickers, just sitting on the desk, face down. I didn't pick it up. I want to be clear about that. I didn't snoop. I just noticed it. I mentioned it at breakfast casually. Hey, is that a new phone? She barely looked up from her coffee. Oh, that's just a loaner from the practice. They're doing some kind of pilot with a new patient portal app. They gave a few of us iPhones to test it. It was so smooth, so calm. She went back to her coffee like she just told me what the weather was. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. She was a therapist. She understood human psychology better than almost anyone I'd ever met. She was, by every measure I had, a trustworthy person. I went to work. I forgot about the phone. Part 3, The Thing About Therapists. Here's something I've thought about a lot since everything fell apart. There's a particular cruelty in being deceived by a therapist. I don't mean that as a dig at the profession. I mean it very literally. Mara spent her entire career helping people recognize manipulation, rebuild trust, understand the ways trauma warps perception. She knew every cognitive distortion in the book. She knew exactly what gaslighting looked like from the inside, and exactly how to deploy it without leaving fingerprints. She knew that when you love someone, you extend almost limitless benefit of the doubt. She knew the architecture of trust because she'd spent a decade and a half studying how it breaks. She used all of that knowledge on me. I understand that now, I didn't understand it then. Part 4, November. The next thing happened about 3 weeks later. I work from home on Fridays. Mara knows this. She leaves for the practice by 8 and is usually back by 6 or 7 depending on her last client. It's a predictable schedule, which is why it stood out when she texted me at noon on a Friday in early November saying she'd have to stay late, a client in crisis. She might not be home until 9 or 10. I told her no worries, ordered pizza, watched a movie. She got home at 9:30, tired, distracted, kissed me on the cheek and went straight to the shower. Fine, normal. Except I'd had a weird, idle thought that afternoon, and I'm still not sure what made me act on it. I think it was boredom, honestly. I was sitting at my desk at about 3 in the afternoon with nothing urgent to do, and I remembered that our car, a shared Subaru we used when neither of us needed it, had one of those GPS tracking apps. We'd installed it years ago after the car got broken into, and we wanted to be able to locate it if it was stolen. I don't think either of us had opened the app in 2 years. I opened it. The car had been parked since 9 a.m. in a neighborhood about 4 miles from our house. Not at the practice, not at a coffee shop or a grocery store. In a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. It had been there since 9 in the morning, through her lunch break, through the evening, through the supposed client crisis. It didn't move until 8:40 p.m. when it drove home. I sat with that for a long time. I want to describe what that moment is like because I think people who haven't experienced it sometimes imagine it as this dramatic, gasping revelation. It wasn't. It was quiet. It was like watching a crack travel slowly across a wall. You see it and you think that shouldn't be there, and then you think, how long has that been there? I didn't say anything that night. I wasn't ready. Part 5, I started paying attention. Here's what I learned about myself in the weeks that followed. I am, apparently, capable of a level of sustained, quiet observation that I didn't know I possessed. I didn't hire a pie, I didn't go through her phone, I didn't follow her, I just started paying attention. I paid attention to the GPS. Over the following 3 weeks, the car went to that same residential address 6 more times, always on days she was supposedly at the practice late, always back before 10 p.m. I paid attention to her behavior. There was a warmth to her that I started to recognize as performance, not coldness, not distance, but the slightly heightened engagement of someone who's being careful. She was more present than usual, more complimentary. She complimented my cooking 3 times in 1 week when she'd maybe done it once a month for the past year. I recognized it eventually for what it was, guilt trying to look like love. I paid attention to the third phone, because yes, there was now a third phone. I found it by accident when I was looking for a phone charger in her nightstand. It was a cheap prepaid Android, the kind you buy with cash at a drugstore, no case. She'd shoved it under a box of old birthday cards. I did pick that one up. The screen was locked. I put it back. At this point I was certain. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't still in denial. I knew. I just didn't know who or how long * or what exactly I was walking into, and I was terrified of the answers. Part 6, Marcus. I found out his name was Marcus in the dumbest possible way. Mara had mentioned, probably a year earlier, that one of her colleagues at the practice had a husband who worked in architecture. She brought it up because I'd been complaining about a renovation contractor, and she'd said, "Oh, Jamie's husband is an architect, he might know someone." That was it. One passing mention. In December, I was at the practice's holiday party. Spouses were invited. It was an annual thing at a wine bar downtown. I was making small talk with people I vaguely recognized. Mara was across the room talking to a colleague named Jamie, who I recognized as the woman whose husband was an architect. Jamie's husband was not there. I asked casually where her husband was. Jamie smiled apologetically. "Oh, Marcus had a work thing. He's been so busy lately, you know how it is." "Marcus." I smiled and said I did know how it was. I spent the rest of the party holding my wine glass very carefully and making absolutely sure my face did not move. Part 7: Confirmation. After the party, I did something I'm not particularly proud of but do not regret. I hired someone. I want to be clear that I'd resisted this for weeks because it felt like a final point of no return. Once you hire a private investigator, you've accepted that your marriage might be over. You've accepted that you're gathering evidence rather than building trust. It's a decision that changes something in you permanently. I made the call on a Tuesday morning from a parking garage. The investigator, a quiet, practical woman named Renee who came recommended through a lawyer friend, had what I needed within 8 days. She delivered it in a manila folder in a coffee shop. Photographs, timestamps, documentation. I won't describe the photographs in detail because I don't want to, and also because I think anyone reading this can fill in the blank. What I will say is that the address was Marcus's home, and that the photographs confirmed it was not ambiguous. There was also this. According to Renee, she had tracked the pattern back as far as she could, based on cross-referencing phone records legally obtained through the account which was in my name and the GPS history. This had been going on for at least 14 months. 14 months. Our dog Hector had been diagnosed with lymphoma 14 months ago. We'd spent $11,000 on his treatment. We'd sat on the kitchen floor together, crying, while the vet told us the odds. I had held my wife while she sobbed and told her we'd fight for him together. She was already sleeping with her colleague's husband. Part 8: What I did next, and what I didn't do. I did not confront her immediately. I know that surprises people. Most people, when I've told this story in fragments to close friends, expect that I would have walked in the door that night and burned the whole thing down. I understand that instinct, but I'm a finance guy. I think in terms of planning, sequencing, risk management. And I was also, and this is the part that's hardest to admit, I was also still grieving even before the conversation happened. I was grieving the marriage I thought I had. I needed a few days to just hold that grief without Myra in the room. So here is what I did in the 2 weeks between receiving Renee's folder and confronting my wife. I quietly moved 3 months of savings into a personal account she didn't have access to. I had a consultation with a divorce attorney, a woman named Patricia who had been recommended by the same lawyer friend. I did not retain her yet, but I understood my options. I called my best friend from college, a guy named Theo who lives in Seattle, and I told him everything. He booked a flight for the following weekend without me asking. I took Hector to the vet for his regular checkup and held him in the waiting room for a long time. And I tried very hard to figure out what I actually wanted from the confrontation. Not what I wanted to say what I wanted to happen. Did I want her to beg? Did I want an explanation? Did I want her to tell me it meant nothing? Did I want her to tell me it meant something, because at least that would be honest? I couldn't answer any of those questions, so I just decided to let it happen and see what she gave me. Part 9: The Conversation. I chose a Sunday evening. Theo was in town, staying at a hotel nearby on standby. I told him I might need to call. Mara was on the couch reading when I sat down across from her and put the manila folder on the coffee table. She looked at it, she looked at me, she didn't open it. I said, I know about Marcus. She went very still. The kind of still that isn't shock, it's the stillness of someone whose mind is working very fast while their body plays dead. I said, I know it's been going on for at least 14 months. I know it's happened at his house while his wife is at work. I know about the prepaid phone in your nightstand. I know about the iPhone on the desk that was not a loaner from the practice. She closed her book. She set it down very carefully like it was made of glass. And then she said, how long have you known? Not asterisk I'm sorry. Not it's not what you think, not let me explain. How long have you known? I remember thinking in that moment, there she is, the therapist. Even in this she was assessing, figuring out what I had, how to respond, what the tactical situation was. Even in the wreckage of her own marriage she was evaluating. I told her I'd known for certain for about 2 weeks and suspected for longer. She nodded slowly, and then, and I want to be precise about this because the order matters, she asked if I was going to tell Jamie. Not I'm sorry, not I love you, not please don't do this. She asked if I was going to tell Jamie. I said I hadn't decided. She said, Jamie doesn't deserve this. I said, neither did I. There was a long silence. Part 10. What she said. Here is, as faithfully as I can reconstruct it, what Mara told me over the next 2 hours. She said she hadn't planned it, they never plan it. She said it had started at a practice social event. Jamie had brought Marcus, the two of them had talked for too long and something had ignited. She said she'd tried to stop it before it started. She said she'd told him at the beginning that it couldn't happen. She said she'd told herself the same thing. She said she loved me. She said that was true and it had always been true and she needed me to believe that. She said the miscarriages had broken something in her that she hadn't known how to tell me. She said she'd felt like a failure. She said she'd felt like she'd let me down. She said she'd started to feel in the years after like I looked at her with a particular kind of sorrow that she couldn't stand. I want to address this directly because I've thought about it a lot. I don't doubt that she felt those things. I think the miscarriages did damage to both of us that we handled differently and maybe not well. But I also know that she had every tool available to her to address that pain. She was a therapist. She had access to therapy. We'd gone to couples therapy twice briefly after the second miscarriage. She understood communication and emotional processing better than almost anyone I knew. She chose Marcus instead. She said she hadn't felt with Marcus the weight of everything they'd been through. She said with him it was lighter. She said she knew that sounded terrible. I said it sounded honest at least. She started to cry. I watched her cry and I felt this is the truest thing I can tell you, almost nothing. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, just a vast, flat emptiness like a field after a flood. Part 11. The days after. I slept in the guest room. Mara didn't fight this. Theo came over the next morning and we sat in the backyard for 4 hours. He didn't say much. He didn't try to offer solutions or silver linings. He just sat there with me, which was exactly what I needed. I retained Patricia, the divorce attorney, that week. I did not tell Jamie immediately. I want to explain this choice because I know some people will judge it. I was not protecting Marcus. I was barely functional. I had just found out my marriage was over. I had a lawyer, a collapsing sense of my own history, and a sick dog. I made a decision consciously to handle one thing at a time. Mara moved her things to a short-term rental 2 weeks later. She didn't fight it. There was a specific moment when she was loading boxes into her car when she paused and looked at Hector sitting on the porch watching her. She went back and knelt down and hugged him for a long time. I stood in the doorway and watched that and thought, she loves this dog. She loves me too, probably. People can love things and still destroy them. Part 12. Telling Jamie. I told Jamie in January. almost 2 months after the confrontation. I'd gone back and forth on it more than any other decision in this entire process. I talked to Theo about it. I talked to Patricia about it. She advised me in her very careful lawyer way to consider the implications and consult a therapist, which I found both helpful and funny given the circumstances. I even eventually talked to a therapist myself, a guy named Dr. Reeves who specializes in infidelity trauma, which is a specialty I'd never imagined I'd need. Dr. Reeves said the question wasn't whether Jamie deserved to know. She did, obviously. The question was whether I was the right person to tell her and whether I was doing it for her or for some other reason, revenge, closure, justice. He asked me to sit with that. I sat with it, and I concluded honestly that I was doing it for her, because I had spent 2 months knowing what she didn't know and I had hated every minute of it. I had watched her at that holiday party warm and smiling and talking to my wife, completely unaware that her husband was in a relationship that was betraying her. I hadn't known her then. I knew she was a person now. She deserved to know. I sent her a message through LinkedIn. I know that sounds strange, but I didn't have her number and I wasn't about to get it through Mara. I said I was Mara's husband, that I needed to speak with her privately, and that it was important and related to both of us. She responded within an hour. We met for coffee 2 days later. I brought the folder. I told her I was sorry. I want to respect her privacy, so I won't reconstruct her reaction in detail. What I will say is that she cried and she didn't seem surprised, and she said 3 words at one point that have stayed with me. I already knew. She'd suspected for months. She'd had her own quiet gathering of evidence. She just hadn't confronted it yet. Seeing my folder was for her not a revelation, it was a confirmation. We sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours. 2 people whose lives had been redirected by the same 2 people. There's a particular strange kinship in that. I hope she's doing okay. Last I heard, she'd filed as well. Part 13, the divorce. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the divorce process in detail because it's ongoing and my attorney would probably prefer I didn't broadcast it on the internet. What I will say is, it has not been clean. There was a period where Mara pushed back on the asset division in ways I found surprising given the circumstances. Patricia had warned me this might happen, that even in cases of clear fault, the other party often reverts to a kind of self-protection mode that can look from the outside like delusion or cruelty. I tried not to take it personally. I didn't always succeed. There have been moments of strange civility. There was a phone call in February where we talked for an hour about Hector's treatment and what would happen to him after. She wanted shared custody of the dog, which I denied, because Hector is my dog and also because I am not made of stone. The conversation somehow ended with us laughing about a camping trip we'd taken in our first year together, where I'd assembled the tent wrong and it had collapsed at 2 in the morning. I hung up and didn't know how to feel about the fact that I'd just laughed with the person who had devastated me. Dr. Reeves says that's normal. He says grief is not linear and love doesn't evaporate cleanly. Part 14, what I know now. I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of therapy, a lot of talking to Theo at midnight when I can't sleep. Here are things I know now that I didn't know before. Deception at this scale is not an accident. It requires sustained effort, planning, and a willingness to look at the person you love every single day and choose to continue. That's not a mistake. It's a series of decisions, hundreds of them. I used to think of infidelity as a moment, a slip, an impulse. 14 months is not a moment. 14 months is a life that ran parallel to mine without my knowledge. I find that harder to grieve than the betrayal itself somehow. I was not oblivious. I noticed things. I just trusted my wife more than I trusted my instincts. That's not stupidity. That's what love looks like when it's working. But I've learned to take my instincts more seriously. The GPS, the phone, the little warmth that felt slightly performed, my body knew before my brain did. You don't stop loving someone because they hurt you. This is the part no one tells you, or maybe everyone tells you and you just don't believe it until it happens to you. I still on some level love Mara, or I love who I thought she was, or I love who she sometimes is. I don't know how to separate those things cleanly and I've stopped trying. Dr. Reeves says I don't have to. People can be deeply known and still be strangers. This is the loneliest thing I've arrived at. I knew Mara's coffee order and her childhood memories and her fears and her laugh and the way she slept. I knew her better than I've ever known anyone. And she was living a life I knew nothing about. The intimacy was real, and it wasn't enough to make her honest. I don't know what to do with that yet. Part 15 now. It's been 4 months since the confrontation. The divorce will likely be finalized by summer. I still live in our house? Hector is in partial remission, which the vet says is better than we had any right to expect. He sleeps at the foot of my bed every night. I talk to him more than is probably healthy. I've been going to the gym, which sounds like a cliché but has been genuinely useful. I've been cooking more. I went to Vermont last month, which felt strange but necessary. I wanted to go back to the place where I'd gotten married and just stand there, look at it. It was just a backyard. Her parents were gracious and sad. Her mother hugged me for a long time without saying anything. I'm not interested in dating. I can't imagine it yet. Maybe I will someday. Theo says I'll be ready when I'm ready, which is either profound or useless depending on the day. What I'm most focused on right now is figuring out who I am without the life I thought I was living. I'd built so much of my identity around being part of a wee asterisk. I was Daniel and Mara. I was half of a couple our friends wanted to emulate. I was a husband. I was planning to maybe adopt eventually. I was going to grow old next to someone I trusted completely. Now I'm just Daniel, 38, dog dad, gym guy working on it. Epilogue: why I'm posting this. I don't really have a question. I know that's against the rules of this sub, but I've been lurking here for 4 months, reading other people's stories in the middle of the night, and it has helped in ways I can't fully explain. Just knowing that other people have been through this, that it doesn't kill you, that people reconstruct. If you're in the early part of this, if you just found out, if you're sitting with that folder or that text thread or that quiet knowing, I just want you to hear from someone on the other side of the worst part. It doesn't stop hurting, but the hurt becomes something you can carry. It becomes weight, not water. You don't drown. Take care of your dog, call your best friend, get a good lawyer. That's all I've got. End of story.